the radical, fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights, the radical. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome. Welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me on this Thursday night. Hope everybody's having a great week and getting ready for the weekend, I guess. All right, we have our AMA show today. So we've got our panelists, our $25 and up supporters. We've got Daniel, Adam, and Roy have joined us, and we'll see if anybody else shows up. But we've got those three right now, and let's see, just a few housekeeping things. Audio sounds better now. Never mind. All right, you guys confuse me. All right, hopefully the audio sounds good. Daniel, Adam, Roy, is the reason your video's off? Is it not letting you go on video?
Right, it says that the host has prevented us from starting video.
All right.
Mine says the same thing. You cannot start your video because the host has stopped it.
Okay, I haven't done anything, so not me.
There's a mystery host, a ghost
No,
host.
I think Angela sets the parameters there. I stopped my video. Sets the parameters for these things, and I don't know how to undo what she probably did.
I'll email you a picture of myself.
I remember. I think I remember.
Okay.
I think I have a vague recollection. All right, I'll check with Angela, but yeah, it's supposed to be, I guess, the $100 get video, the $25 get only audio, but we'll see why you guys' videos are blocked. I think it's some setting in Zoom that has to be changed in a global way. At least that's my understanding. All right, so today open Q&A. So super chat is open, and you can ask questions on the super chat. We'll have our panelists ask questions. Questions with $20 or more get priority, of course. And Ali is in the house, so we have a goal of $600 to raise tonight. So as usual, yeah, if you guys don't ask on the super chat, we'll just keep circling with Daniel, Adam, and Roy. We'll see how many questions they've got lined up for us tonight. I thought I'd start off just with a quick discussion of, I guess, what's breaking news or just in the last couple of days. And that is John Stossel has sued Facebook. But it's interesting, he's sued Facebook because of the various warnings and the various claims that are positioned on his videos that say this is inaccurate, this is not quite right, or stuff like that. But more than that, he's suing them because as part of, they claim that his videos are not right. They actually have a quote there from him. In quotes, as if he said it. And it turns out he never said it. He never made such a quote. So he's suing them for defamation. Now, I like this lawsuit. I like the idea of suing them, basically suing them on the idea that they are claiming that Stossel is a liar. They're claiming that Stossel says untrue things, they're besmirching his character. As Stossel says in the video he produced when he announced this lawsuit, he says they're a private company. They have a right to not show my videos. They have a right to do what they want with the videos. What they don't have a right to do is present a quote that I never said as if it's my quote and claim that I'm misrepresenting a topic when I'm not misrepresenting. He made a real effort to go and try to find the Facebook fact checkers. The video is one about the forest fires. So, and it was fact checked by an organization called Climate Feedback. And of course, Climate Feedback won't respond. He's talked to some scientists who work for Climate Feedback. They're actually arguing that the video that John made is pretty good. There's nothing wrong with it. And there's something wrong with the system if it has, if it's claimed that it's a false video. You can't get an answer from the people. It turns out that there's Climate Feedback is affiliated with something called Science Feedback that does also all the monitoring over COVID-19 and over any kind of climate science issue. And he shows also other videos of his, the different claims they've made about his videos and how false they are. He then interviews the scientists that work for Climate Feedback, and at least on many of these things, they claim, no, the video's fine. So somebody at Climate Feedback, somebody at the so-called fact check organization that Facebook uses, has shockingly a political agenda, and it has nothing to do with facts. It has nothing to do with science. It has nothing to do with any of that. It's all political. And I like the fact that John is not suing them for, I don't know, not monetizing, for dropping his videos. He's suing them for defamation, for defaming him. And I think it sounds to me like, I haven't read the legal case, but it sounds to me like a legitimate case. Hopefully it'll wake some people up at Facebook. Hopefully maybe it'll place some penalties on these fact checkers and change the incentive structure around these things. So thumbs up to John Stossel for going after Facebook on the fake, fact check stuff, and for defaming him. This is the kind of lawsuit much better than the Prager lawsuit. Prager's upset because he's not being monetized. He's not arguing that he's being defamed or anything else. He's arguing that his free speech has been violated, and that's a completely bogus lawsuit. This seems like a right lawsuit, and it'll be interesting to follow and see what happens. So we'll keep track of it and let you know what happens as a consequence. All right. I see I've got 2 thumbs down. It's interesting. There's some people who come to the video before I even start and press the thumbs down button, and then I guess leave. Maybe they're still listening. I don't know. But it's good. It's good to elicit such hatred that people make an effort to come and give you a thumbs down. So put some thumbs up just to counter the impact. All right, everybody. Reminder again, Super Chat questions. That's the show today. So no Super Chat questions. The burden will be on Daniel, Adam, and Roy. All right, let's get started with Daniel.
Thanks, Yaron. I really enjoyed the debate you did with Matt McCannis, property rights, good or bad. I thought he did a good job of stating what he was for and against, made kind of an interesting story, and then he heard you and he sort of changed his story, but it was good. The thing that I really wonder about is even after he changed his story, he said something along the lines of, well, understand me, we're going to protect the property rights, or I want to protect the property rights of a little girl with a lemonade stand. They're going to be fine, but the Amazons and the Googles of the world, man, we're going after those guys. I mean, does anyone actually find that a convincing argument that you can, in one case protect someone's property rights and another case not?
I mean, I think I do, because I hear this a lot from these neo-Marxists or neo-socialists. I don't know if this was also an argument that was made historically, but certainly recently I'm hearing it all over the place. And the argument it goes like this. We believe in private property when it relates to your personal property. That is the stuff in your home, maybe a home up to a particular size, which I guess the government will determine. Maybe income up to a certain amount, maybe a small business where you don't have employees. And that's why the lemonade stand, the evil that they perceive. And this to some extent goes back to Marx, although Marx was a much more sophisticated thinker than they are. The evil as they perceive it is the employer-employee relationship. That is the idea that there is this, that there are people that are, that at an employer's behest, that they get a salary. They, according to the socialists, are being exploited. So as soon as the business rises to the point of exploitation, of controlling other people through a contract, through a salary, then they're against private property. Then private property is out, and that needs to be socialized. The workers need to own the means of production, whether it's through the state or through unions or through just the workers themselves. And they try to build a whole case around this. The socialists I debated last year, 2 years ago now, I did this series of debates with the socialists. I did 3 university campuses in 3 days across the country. And he was very much about this, no, we're going to protect your personal property. Now, you wouldn't define personal property, right? He's not going to defend my Ferrari. So it's up to a point, right? It's your Soviet issued apartment. It's your Soviet issued automobile. It's your Soviet issued clothes. They're yours. You can keep them. But anything above that lowest common denominator, there's no private property applied to it. So it's not private property. It's a completely bogus, and it's really is the lowest common denominator. They have no concept of division of labor. They have no concept of voluntary exchange, voluntary interaction. They have no concept of a business and what a business does and how it functions. And but yeah, this is the modern left. This is the modern kind of socialist. They're very, very opposed to businesses that have employees, that have an employer-employee relationship.
They want a salary, but they don't want someone else telling them what they have to do to earn that salary.
They don't even necessarily want salary, right? Because in their vision, they just get what they need in order to survive, in order to do well. It just happens. It just arrives. It's just there. The states or the union or whoever just provides for them. So a salary would imply an exchange of money for work, but they don't see it that way. For them, it's the exchange that's explicit in to each according to his needs, from each according to his ability, and that's exactly what they preach. You need something, you shall get it. It's or your needs are a human right, in quotes, and therefore they shall be provided to you. So it really is a bizarre, floating, detached from reality, kind of Platonic idea of the world out there, and how production happens and how wealth is created. And they think that if we shifted to a world like that, they wouldn't get poorer. That is, everybody would get richer. We'd all be equally rich, but we'd be super rich. They really seem to believe that. The iPhone wouldn't disappear. We'd get even better iPhones. And it's complete detachment from reality. It's complete evasion of the facts of history, of the facts of economics, of the facts of human behavior and human incentives. And yet, this is a growing a view. I mean, I've done this analysis, I can't remember, a few months ago, on the fact that we are now moving into, for the first time in 30 years, into a world in which socialism, communism is viewed positively, that these, no memory, no history, no knowledge, no understanding of the Soviet Union, of the Berlin Wall, of Mao's China, of the consequences of socialism and communism. So that idea that 1991, with the breakup of the Soviet Union, was the end of history, it's gone. I mean, the idea that liberal democracies had won and that communism and various forms of collectivism, statism had been thoroughly defeated, all those ideas are completely gone. What we have today is just the statism, just the communism, the socialism, and it really is. These people really do believe that they should and they deserve to get because they need. It's connected to this other thing that I talked about on the show, which is this idea that these kids coming out of college are going, well, why should I work? Why can't society, in quotes, take care of me? Why can't I just do my hobbies? I think there's even a name for this, some kind of a wealthy utopian, wealthy communist world. They truly believe that they can be wealthy and communist at the same time. It really is a complete floating abstraction. It's a complete Platonic myth detached from any reality.
And somewhere along the line that comes that same term, wage slaves. We're all, slaves.
Absolutely. I mean, wages are slavery. Working for somebody else is slavery. And so they evade the concept of slavery, and they negate that there's the real nature of slavery. And then, of course, on the flip side, they negate the idea of that you need an entrepreneur to start a business, that you need ideas, that you need capital, and and of course that there's value in division of labor, and that voluntary interaction is legitimate. I mean, I've asked on a number of occasions, so what you're saying is, in your world, if I start a company and employed people, I would go to jail. That would be illegal. Even though they voluntarily would come to work and I voluntarily would pay for them, that would be illegal in your world. And the answer is yes, it would be illegal in their world. That's how horrific it is.
Amazing. Thank you.
Adam.
Yes, I would like to add the source of this, which is that Christians and people in Christian societies, even if they consider themselves secular, are raised to believe that everything comes from God. And if they're about to eat, they thank God. They are grateful to God. Now, substitute society. Everything is produced by society. They're not aware that people had to produce what they're eating, that it took the work of individuals. And this habit of substituting society for God and leaving everything else the same is very pervasive, at least in our society.
I think that's right, and I think that's so. A number of things here have their origin in Christianity, if you think about it, right? The whole idea of completely floating, detached from reality, unconnected to reality, it comes from Christianity. I mean, the idea of mysticism, the whole idea of a Trinity, the whole idea of a Garden of Eden, all of that are Christian floating abstractions, which then the communists replace different elements. Instead of God, you get the proletarian. Instead of the Garden of Eden, you get Marx's ultimate utopia that surely sounds a lot like the Garden of Eden. And instead of God providing manna from heaven, you get the robots producing the stuff, or you get society just creating stuff, and stuff just appears without any appreciation for individual productiveness, without any appreciation for the individual mind, for the individual entrepreneur, for the individual creativity. I mean, Christianity is, I mean, it is the vehicle with which Plato's ideas are brought in, to a large extent, are brought into the modern world. It is through Christianity. Christianity is Neoplatonic. You know, it's pretty much universally understood. All you need to do is read Augustine, and you can see its Neoplatonic roots.
But what I also see is that even though people have a formal knowledge of how things are made, it's disconnected from their consciousness. It's not in their minds. If you ask them, who made this thing that I'm eating, for example, they can probably tell you about all the people who were involved in the whole process. They were taught that in school, but they're not truly aware of it, because when they think about where it comes to them, it doesn't come from the individuals who actually produced it. It comes from God or from society, which means the same thing.
Yeah, and if you think about it, it's Obama's "you didn't make it, you didn't build it," right? That's society built it. Society made it possible for you to build it. So there's an understanding that the businessman had to do the things that the businessman did, but he could only do it because of society. And in the Christian version, he could only do it because God allowed him, or God gave him the tools, or God gave him the ability to do it. So even though they have this concrete understanding of, yes, person X did Y, in the one version, it is society that made that possible. In the second version, it is God that made that possible. But they both come from the same root, which is complete detachment from reality, a rejection of a free will, and a rejection of a real sense of agency that individuals have, and that, and the role of the mind, and what the human mind can do. I mean, again, Obama's speech, "You didn't build that," the one that we did, the "You didn't build that" spiel, is really, really powerful and really indicative of how corrupt this particular view of economics and of justice, of attributing production to is.
And the other factor is determinism, because again, Marx, just like Calvin, was a total determinist.
Sure.
And so, according to their doctrines, people don't produce because they choose to use their minds. God makes them. God forces them, and the only gratitude they should have is to God or to society, essentially deterministically compelling everyone who produced what you eat or use to produce it for you. There is no role in that for individual volition, individual choice, individual decision to go and make something.
Absolutely. I think that's right. All right. Let's go to Roy.
Hi. Just before I go into my first topic, a couple of months ago, I sent you an email commenting on your account of the your second John Mackey debate. I focused particularly on the issue of a doctor who has set up a private practice and what.
Yep.
Do you recall seeing it or reading it?
I do recall seeing it, yes.
Okay, I just wanted to, and even reading it perhaps.
Yes, if I saw it. I read it.
Okay, all right, good. That's just checking. Okay, no, I don't have actual questions, just some comments on The Outpost. You recommended the film, and for anyone who doesn't recall or didn't hear, the film focused on a bloody battle in 2009 in Afghanistan between the American forces and the Taliban. And you praised the film, and you also commented that it made you angry. And that put me in mind of another film, and my reaction to the film Black Hawk Down,
Yes,
which is from about 20 years ago.
very
And
similar.
that focused on the Battle of Mogadishu in Somalia in 1993. Did you see that film?
Yeah, absolutely. Very, very well made. It was made by, I think, by Ridley Scott. I think it was.
Yes.
Again, the same kind of thing is sending troops into battle without a clear assignment, without knowing why they're there, without a mandate to win and to be victorious, crippling them with rules of engagement that make it impossible for them to actually fight and defend themselves, and then watching them being slaughtered and brutalized by a barbaric, primitive enemy. And it's exactly the same thing. And in that sense, there's nothing new. This is the American military. This is the American military today. This is what Congress doesn't ask the generals when it brings the generals in front of it. Why don't you win the frigging war? And why are you allowing our kids to die for nothing? They should have, instead of asking the generals questions, they should have showed The Outpost and asked them to comment on various scenes in The Outpost. I mean, it's truly despicable. And at the end of the day, it is a sign of moral, spiritual, and existential decline. I mean, this is more than anything, I think, the sign of the United States, going away, because it won't defend itself. It won't defend its own kids.
Well, there's something even worse, in a sense, in Black Hawk Down, and that is, why the hell were we sending American lives, risking American lives in a civil war in Somalia? So there's that additional element to me, which is even worse.
Yes.
Arguably even worse.
Yeah, of course. I think Afghanistan is worse, because Afghanistan is a reason to be there. There's clearly a rational objective for being there, and they still don't do it, right? And they still screw it up, and they still sacrifice young kids for nothing, instead of actually fighting the battle and doing the things that's necessary in order to actually do. So there is a real self-defense reason to be in Afghanistan. So withdrawing from Mogadishu and withdrawing from Somalia in the end, which is what they did, okay, some kids lost their lives, but at the end, America is not less safe because of it, although it is, because it represents that paper tiger. But withdrawing and leaving Afghanistan, having lost the war, is clearly self-destructive. It's suicidal. And
the consequences in Afghanistan were far graver.
And yet they do the same thing, same behavior.
Yeah, but I think
the altruism is more explicit in Mogadishu.
Yeah,
and that was Bill Clinton, if I remember right. Or was it George Bush Senior, and then Clinton? I can't remember.
Yeah. Well, but to me, it's in a sense a fundamental error, in that we had no reason to be there, absolutely no valid reason.
Absolutely.
And as you say, in Afghanistan, there was a reason that we could have done something there to our advantage to enhance our security, but we didn't. And we just sacrificed the lives, a real sacrifice of the lives. And it was heartbreaking to watch. Yeah. Both films were heartbreaking.
Yep, I agree.
And both films were very good. In fact, I think I would say Black Hawk Down was even better than The Outpost.
I think as a movie, yes. I think you know, the director Black Hawk Down is a better director and was more effective in what he was presenting. There's no question.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, thanks, Roy. All right, just to remind everybody, you know, Ali is going to be really depressed if unless you start picking up the super chats. But there's an opportunity to ask questions. You can ask questions about anything you want, and any issue. I see a lot of people saying stuff on the super chat. Instead of just poking at people, ask a question or make a comment, but put a $ next to it, and I will be getting to the super chat questions in a couple of minutes. We're, I think, under $100. So still $500+ to raise tonight. All right, Debbie.
Hi, Yaron.
Hey.
So Ali may be disappointed, but I am so happy right now because I found out about 2 hours ago that I got a big promotion.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, to director of
Congratulations.
project engineering. Yeah. So so
Good.
yeah. So in that spirit, maybe you can share in my joy by telling about a time when you achieved a big goal or accomplishment in your career.
Oh God. I hate these kind of questions. Sorry, Debbie, but because I have to remember stuff, and I just don't remember stuff. The past is like a black hole mostly for me. A great accomplishment. I mean, I think there were a lot, you know, when I was at AOI, you know, whether it was, you know, taking the revenue of the Institute from 2 million to 8-10 million, I think, one year, in about a decade, whether it was some of the project success that we had. There were dozens of occasions like that that represented basically, you know, it wasn't a promotion. I've never been promoted in my life because I've always had these kind of, you know, in the jobs where I was either CEO or my own boss in some way or another. So it was more about just succeeding. You know, the first lecture I gave at an OCON, you know, and the first course I gave at OCON were real OCON Objectives conferences. Were real joys for me, because it was like, yeah, I mean, I've achieved something meaningful. I mean, I thought of myself as I was just a student of Objectivism, and now I was teaching, which was a big step forward. So. You know, just business achievements, raising money for my fund, you know, having a great year. This year's a good year. Having a great year in the fund. There's just a lot of getting articles published as an academic, or getting my first teaching award as an academic after they didn't want to hire me because they didn't think I could teach. So that was pretty rewarding. To stick it in their faces. So yeah, I've had a lot of these kind of. It's not so much that the external world my bosses recognize, because I've never really had bosses in a sense. I've always been working for myself. As an academic, you kind of have bosses, but not really, because you're left alone. There's no. But that's fantastic. Congratulations, Debbie.
Thank you.
Very exciting.
Thank you. I for someone who can't remember, you got quite a good list of awesome accomplishments that did come to your mind. So
lived a long time, so the lists are long. So
maybe the folks in the super chat could help me celebrate by achieving the goal for tonight. What is that goal again?
It's $600. So we've got 550 to go.
All right, people.
Today's slow. It's a third night in a row. I think everybody's a little tired. Everybody's a little sluggish. They've spent all their money in their previous shows. But Debbie, you know, Debbie's celebrating, and you should join in, even if it's $1 or $2, just to show your participation is great. All right, let's turn to some super chat questions. We'll start with Vinny. Vinny with 31 Australian dollars. What is your opinion of, oh, this one, this is the one I don't know the answer to, because I don't know what he's asking about. Let me see if he answered me, because I asked what it was. If somebody could tell me what the Magnitsky Act is. I don't know what the Magnitsky Act is. So he's asking, what do I think of the Magnitsky Act? Is it an appropriate way for government to react to human rights abuses? I just don't know what it is.
Yes,
So,
I can tell you.
okay, tell me.
Okay, it was an act passed by Congress back when the Soviet Union was prohibiting people from leaving the Soviet Union. And it imposed sanctions against officials responsible for keeping people from leaving the Soviet Union. In particular, there were things that they were not allowed to do, like have financial transactions with businesses that did business in the United States and so on.
Yep.
Now, today it's applied primarily to violations of human rights in places like China and Hong Kong. For example, Carrie Lam, the chief executive of Hong Kong, is now under Magnitsky sanctions, which means that she cannot have a bank account in any bank that does business in the United States. And since all the Hong Kong banks do business in the United States,
Sure.
the chief executive of Hong Kong cannot have a checking account.
Okay.
She cannot
So-
have a credit card.
Perfect.
And
So
only do payments using an internal mainland China service, which fortunately for her is available.
Yep. So what do I think of that? You know, so I think it is a tool. I don't have any problems with it. I think it is a way to penalize specific officials and specific regimes for violating individual rights of their citizens in ways that are that you deem horrific. But I think it's only one tool among many, and the problem is that it's used way too selectively, and it's used in a vacuum. So, for example, and I've said this before, given what China's done in Hong Kong, given what China does to its own people, I think we should do significantly more severe things to China. For example, we should not have an embassy there. We should not recognize it international organizations. We should, in a sense, not boycott trade with them, because governments don't do trade, individuals do. You as an individual could choose to boycott China. But anything governments do between each other, we shouldn't do. The president of the United States shouldn't meet with the premier of China. He should meet with officials in China. And yes, I could imagine where you would use this act, for example, to say, I don't know, members of the Chinese government cannot enter the United States, or cannot open bank accounts in the United States, or cannot do X, Y, Z, as a way of penalizing them specifically for the decisions they are making specifically. What I'm against restrictions on trade. Trade is something you as an individual get to decide. You can decide if you want to trade with China or not, but a government gets to decide what kind of relations it has with other governments. And so, and I think in this case, we shouldn't have diplomatic relations with a lot of countries in the world, Saudi Arabia being another one, and a bunch of others. Debbie, go celebrate, have a good time. So Debbie's off to celebrate. And this act strikes me as one of the many tools one could use to sanction these kind of organizations, and to not organizations, the individuals responsible within these governments. So yeah, I think it's completely appropriate to use. I just wish we take the next step. Why do we meet with Putin? Why do we meet with Xi? Why does the president of the United States demean himself and go and meet with these people? Why do we have diplomatic relations with them. There are ways, there are ways to secure that we don't accidentally engage in a nuclear war without actually sanctioning evil regimes. All right, let's see. That was Vinny. So the answer is okay. We got the answer. Thank you, Adam, for helping out there. All right, let's do Jacob. Jacob just put in $50. So that's amazing. Thank you, Jacob. Really, really appreciate that. We need another, 10 of those, and we're done for the evening. So go for it, guys. Old credit card expired, forgot to renew. So here's the backlog. Had furniture movements, condo purchase, and a bunch of other stuff. Also, Jim, I owe you a response on Facebook. What are you talking about? Who's Jim? All right. Any progress on John Allison coming on the show? I have some leadership questions. No, unfortunately, no progress, but I need to remember to do that. All this, somebody coming on the show is always just a logistical nightmare. So I procrastinate about it. But yes, that's a great idea to get John Allison to come on the show. I will talk to John, and we will make it happen. So thank you, Jacob, for the catch up. Really appreciate the support. That is great. All right. Let's go back to our panel. Given that there are no more $20 questions or more, we'll get to Dave's questions on the next round. Of course, you still have an opportunity to ask questions on the super chat. $20 or more. Ali is over there frantically not understanding what's going on today. All right, Daniel,
All right, back to principles for a minute. Bezos started Amazon at a time when basically all the bookstores were brick and mortar, and did things that no one else has ever done. Later pivoted the company to sell a whole lot more than books online, and created one of the greatest companies in the world that the world's ever seen. And obviously there's a lot of virtue of independence in doing that. But now in an FCC filing, Amazon is taking aim at Musk. And there's a lot of bad things you can say about Musk, but the specific things that are said here is, quote, whether it is launching satellites with unlicensed antennas, launching rockets without approval, building an unapproved launch tower, or reopening a factory in violation of a shelter-in-place order, the conduct of SpaceX and other Musk-related companies makes their view plain. Rules are for other people, and those who insist upon or even simply request compliance are deserving of derision and ad hominem attacks. And leaving aside the ad hominem attacks, how does someone build a company like Amazon and think that independence is something that's good when we have it, but if someone else acts a little bit independent, well, that's bad. They're a tall poppy and should be cut down.
It really is hard to figure out, why and how people hold what they hold in the way that they hold it. Why don't people live by principle? Why do they feel it's okay to use government as a competitive edge? Now, you could make the argument that Elon Musk does the same thing. And I think that I've seen some defenders of Amazon make that argument that Elon Musk uses government all the time to defend himself and promote his business and undermine competition in the sense of getting deals from the government, in a illegitimate way. But look, Microsoft did the same thing. If you remember, Microsoft was attacked for antitrust violations, and it was horrified by the attack. This is in the mid to late 90s. And it tried to defend itself. And there were even moments in which Bill Gates almost came close to rejecting the whole idea of antitrust. And then as soon as they settled and everything was finished, they turned around and started attacking everybody else on antitrust and suing everybody else on the basis of antitrust. And it's as if it's part of the pragmatic businessman's view that if others are doing it, it should be okay for me to do it. That is, everything's legit in it's pure pragmatism, right? It's short-termism. It's unprincipled thinking. I don't know if to blame Jeff Bezos for this or not. He is retired after all. He's not the CEO anymore. Maybe, but I don't know. Maybe he supports this completely, or maybe he doesn't. It's hard to tell. I think some of this is coming out of Blue Origin, and Blue Origin clearly is his company. So one suspects that, yes, he is partially behind this. But this is the pragmatic streak. I also think that this is what the mixed economy does to the better people. It grinds them down. It exhausts them. It penalizes them for being principled. It rewards the pragmatists. It rewards the people who abuse. It rewards the cronies. So if you're not a crony, you're penalized. So there's a temptation to become a crony. So it's the whole system is rigged against the independent thinker. It's rigged against the man of principle. And it wears it down. It wears them down. And I think ultimately most of them, very few don't succumb to this. So there are very few who can stand on principle and not turn to pragmatism. And to a large extent, it's because they don't have a philosophy. They don't have a basis on which to stand on principle. So it's tremendously sad, but it seems to happen over and over and over again.
It really does. And like I said, it's baffling to me. And the best spin I can put on it sometimes with Musk, for instance, is that he will start a project that he's going to do anyway, Starship, and he gets NASA involved. And then when the FAA says, no, you can't have a license, he runs to NASA and say, hey, these are US taxpayer dollars. The FAA is basically stealing US taxpayer dollars, seeing them misspent. Will you help me get this license? And NASA does. And so he's kind of playing this regulatory arbitrage or something like that.
Well, he definitely does that. There's no question he's doing stuff like that. He also clearly articulates, the case that he doesn't really care about regulators, although he seems to. So he's a very mixed character. I love the one where somebody asked him about the satellites. Well, what about national regulators? And he said, well, they'll shake their fists at the satellite because that's all they'll be able to do. I wish he lived up to that spirit. Yeah. But why Bezos would do it, why Bill Gates would do it, I think it's this almost impossibility of sticking to principle in the face of constant, nonstop barrage against them.
Everything's set against them. Got it. Thank you.
Adam?
Yes, I wanted to come back to something that we discussed earlier, namely that Christians are trained to be grateful to God for other people's choices to produce things that they then trade with them. And the Marxist switch is from God to society, but it's the same thing.
Yep.
Other people produce what I consume because society makes them. So I should only be grateful to society, not to the individuals who actually choose to make things. And I email you because I think it's, at least I find it useful to, for example, before eating, introspect into my knowledge of all the individual decisions to produce that people took to produce what I am consuming. Because I think this is something that is missing from Christian and therefore Marxist societies. People are not aware of the individual choices to produce that people make.
Yes, and I think that's a really wonderful way of putting a wonderful thing to do. That is, people say objectivist, you don't have spirituality or whatever, but we exactly do, and it's things like thinking about all the ways in which the stuff we have around us was produced by individuals is a consequence of ideas, is a consequence of the hard work and effort and entrepreneurship of particular people out there, and really appreciating those people and admiring them, and that is part of what it means to be spiritual, I think, in an objectivist sense. You also remind me of a great scene. I don't know if you've seen the movie Shenandoah, but in the movie Shenandoah, Jimmy, this is a family in Virginia that refuses to take sides in a civil war. That's kind of the context of the movie, but this is a particular scene. They're about to have dinner. Jimmy Stewart has, I can't remember, 3, 4, 5 sons, and his wife has died. When she died, he promised to raise them as good Christians, but he's not a Christian. He's not a believer. And but they have to say grace at the beginning of a meal because that's what he promised his wife. So everybody holds hands and they bow their heads, and Jimmy Stewart goes, we planted the seeds, we tilled the soil, we planted the seeds, we watered it, we did all the stuff. We harvested the grain, we baked the thing, we hunted everything on this table, he says. Everything is a table is a consequence of the work we did. Thank you, God, anyway. And then he goes on. And of course, it's Jimmy Stewart, and it's done a lot better than that. But it's a fabulous scene. And it really is that notion of taking, first of all, taking credit for what you do, taking credit for your own production, for the fact that you brought this stuff into the world. It's here because of you, because of your effort. And then, particularly in a modern division of labor society, the stuff that your effort brings into the world is a consequence. You've traded with people who have brought stuff into the world through their effort, and you're celebrating both your achievement and their achievement. And I think about this particularly, I think this is a real meaning of Thanksgiving. That is the thanks we give in Thanksgiving. But I think there is a value in saying grace in a sense, or silently thinking grace. But what that really means is giving credit where credit is due, and doing justice in your own mind to the people who have made possible the wealth that you have around you. And you can do that every day with all the stuff that we all have. I mean, we should be thankful to Zoom and the people who founded Zoom, and the people who capitalized Zoom, and the people who the engineers there, the entrepreneurs, the people who made what we do right now possible. It's pretty amazing.
And on Thanksgiving, there is a part of Rourke's courtroom speech.
Yep.
Where he mentions all the men who made the first of the choice that made civilization today possible. And he says it's a bit of a downer to say, although it's true, so I do read it exactly as Ayn Rand wrote it, that probably the man who tamed fire was burnt at the stake that he taught his brothers to build.
Absolutely. And we know what happened to Prometheus, right? We know what happened to Prometheus for bringing fire to man. That is symbolic of what happened to the first man who tamed fire, probably.
But I think, starting a celebration meal like Thanksgiving with an appropriate reading And I think Ayn Rand wrote a lot of very inspiring stuff that's perfect for those occasions.
Yes, I agree. Okay, Roy.
Okay, so I get a lot of value from your film and TV commentary. So in the spirit of value for value, I'll make some recommendations. Now, in yesterday's, it was yesterday's show, you and Debbie were discussing the qualities that books offered in contrast with other forms of art. And
Yep.
you pointed out the books are longer than a typical film.
Yep.
And we're therefore able to immerse ourselves more deeply in the stories and the issues. And Debbie then said that she hates when a book ends because having spent so much time with the characters, she wants to see what they do next.
Sure.
So that takes me to the Turkish TV series with the name that I always keep. It's a very unfortunate name because I've had trouble remembering it. Black Money Love. The term black money, which I hadn't heard before, means money gained illegally or money that you may have earned legally but didn't report to the authorities. Anyhow, that TV series has 164 episodes. And Netflix lists them all under season 1.
Okay.
Now, I think they were actually shown under a few seasons.
Yep.
But it's Netflix rules, and Netflix has a season 1. And those 164 episodes run a total of over 110 hours. It's pretty wonderful. It's set in Istanbul, and its themes are love, romance, crime, corruption, justice, and redemption. And the heroes are brave and virtuous. The villains are blood-boilingly hateful. And the romance is just as it should be, very, very romantic.
Good.
And and like Debbie, when I got to the end of episode 164, I had an almost palpable feeling of loss.
Yep.
I still think about the characters. Many days have gone by and I still think about them. I still want to know, and I may start crying now because it's as though they became part of my life.
Sure.
So I really recommend the series. If anyone who has to spare 110 hours, or at least start it. And it's also interesting because I had never been to Istanbul, and with the current government there, I'm not inclined to rush over.
Yes.
But this was it was therefore somewhat more exotic than another British crime drama. Yeah. So I recommend that.
Good. I mean, one of the great virtues of Netflix is you get all these international dramas. You get these series from all over the world, and it's a real joy because you discover stuff that you would never otherwise. There's no way you would ever watch a series from Turkey in any other context other than the existence of Netflix. There's something else we should be thankful for on a regular basis.
I am.
Good.
I am. Oh, no. And I have voiced it many times.
I know.
And and it's also Netflix that, well, it was you who introduced me to Mr. Sunshine. And it was Netflix that made it possible for me to see it. And it introduced me to Korean television, which I adore. And I've mentioned once before that it has inspired me to take a trip to Seoul.
Yep.
Which as soon as COVID allows all that, as soon as traveling is once again a real thing.
Yeah.
I'm going to do it. I have another one, but I don't want to hog the time. So if there's a third round, I'll tell you about my second recommendation.
Sounds good. Thank you, Roy. All right, we've got a few $20 questions now, so we'll run through them. Justin says, in Atlas Shrugged, the government appears to be enforcing extreme austerity. Currently, we don't seem to be seeing any signs of such policy in the West. Would the Great Reset be the defining turning point to an Atlas Shrugged world? Well, it's not clear because, I mean, ultimately you'd get austerity, but the whole shtick of the Great Reset, and I just watched Greta, Greta, the fascist little girl with those scary eyes that is angry at all of us. Greta buys into this too, and that is the idea that we can do all this stuff with climate change. We can stop the motor of the world. We can stop fossil fuels. And we can do that without any economic consequences. And I guess they all buy into the idea that they can just print money. So ultimately, you'll get the austerity through inflation and hyperinflation and just all this money gets thrown out there into the world, but it can't buy anything because nothing is being produced. You know, you're ready. It's interesting. You know, when capitalism works, when markets are working, you don't get bottlenecks. You don't get shortages. But look at what's going on right now in Great Britain. People are lining up to get gasoline. They're predicting that they won't have gas, you know, gas to heat their homes and gas to make electricity in the UK in the winter, that they're going to run short. There's a shortage of chips, electronic chips all over the world. And people blame COVID, but it has nothing to do with COVID. Things adjust, prices adjust, production adjusts, supply chains adjust. They adjust to things like COVID. Markets are beautiful, amazing things that can adjust. So there is no, the fact that we've got bottlenecks, the fact that we've got shortages is a sign that we're not quite in an Atlas Shrugged world, but we're kind of approaching that. We're playing around with that. We're at the edges of that. We got close in the 70s when the government was so intervening and fiscal monetary policy was so insane, and there was so much malinvestment and distortion. And in many ways, there's even more so today. And so we're definitely not going to escape if we continue on the path we are of that Atlas Shrugged world, but it won't take the same path exactly. They'll inflate for a while. They'll pretend everything's fine. They'll hand people money and that'll be worth something for a while. But ultimately, you go into decline, you go into decay, you go into real depression, which is what you see in Atlas Shrugged. And we're heading in that direction. It's just a question of when. And it can take a long time. So Atlas is a novel. It's a it's a stylized view of the world. So it condenses timelines. So what would happen in reality, maybe in 100 years, happens in Atlas Shrugged in 10 years. And that's what you're seeing there. So unfortunately, we're heading there, not because of a great reset or anything like that, but just because that's what governments are doing. And that's where we're heading. And as I said on the show, I don't remember, a couple of days ago, there is no force out there. There's no political force out there in the West arguing against the current trends. There's no political party today in America arguing against massive increases to government spending, government control, government involvement in the economy.
Pelosi tells us it's zero cost.
Yeah, and it doesn't cost us anything. We just print money with no cost. We can regulate with no cost. We can go off of fossil fuel with no cost. And both parties believe that. You know, the Republicans are a little bit better when they're in the opposition. They seem to have a little bit more economic sense. But we know that as soon as they get into power, that knowledge disappears. Okay, Thessie, $20, thank you. What is the difference between a so-called rat and a truth speaker to injustice? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think there are reasons good people are labeled the former, not the latter? So a rat being somebody who tells on people when they do bad things. Well, I think it's an unjust label for when it is, look, there are a number of different ways in which you could be a so-called rat, right? Somebody does something bad, clearly objectively bad, you know about it and you tell the authorities. that's not being a rat. That's an act of justice. That's the right thing to do. Somebody does something, not nice, impolite, or somebody makes a mistake, and you let the world know for no reason other than to embarrass the person, for no reason other to humiliate them or to cause them problems, then you're being a rat. So part of it is the offense. Part of it is your motivation. If your motivation is justice, and justice is called for, then you're not a rat. You're not a negative terminology. But if your motivation is just envy or dislike or just to tear somebody down, and the offense is not a grave offense, then what you're being is a rat. Then there's something wrong. There's something bad with what you're doing. Right? So snitching is fine if the motivation is right and if the offense is worthy of the snitch, right? All right, Dean asks, hey, Yaron, can you talk a little bit about the difference between Hamas and Fatah? Was Yasser Arafat a radical Muslim or more of a nationalist authoritarian? And how Israel should act towards the two? I mean, the difference is basically religion. Fatah was a nationalist, authoritarian, terrorist organization dedicated to the Palestinian nationhood and the destruction of Israel in the name of Palestinian nationhood. Hamas doesn't care about the nation. It doesn't care about Palestinians per se. Hamas is a part of an Islamist global movement that wants to bring Islam to the forefront and believes in the imposition of Sharia law everywhere. Not just on Israel, but in the entire planet. So Hamas is more, I think, brutal, more, I hate to say principled, but more committed to specific ideas, and they're more mystical because they report to God directly, right? They don't have this intermediary called the state. So both are evil. In many regards, Hamas is much more difficult to deal with because it deals with religion and faith and fanaticism, religious fanaticism. But both are terrorists, both are evil, both should have been destroyed a long, long time ago. Crushed, indeed. And Israel should, we don't have time now to talk about everything Israel should have done from the beginning. But the principle is you don't tolerate evil, you crush it. You don't tolerate somebody killing your own people. You destroy them before they can do any harm to you. And Yasser Arafat should have been killed. He should have been killed a long, long time before he ultimately died. Hamas should be eviscerated and eliminated. Every single leader of theirs should be assassinated. And all of the people who work for them should be imprisoned or killed. All right, Jacob, $50. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Oh, wow. So Jacob says, pitching in for the hours of content I've enjoyed. Thank you. You also came and spoke to my students in my classroom in Santa Ana High School a few years back. I remember that. It was a real treat. I really, really, really enjoyed it. The students were fantastic. Hopefully it had a positive impact on their lives. Hopefully, I remember a lot of them wanted to read The Fountainhead after my talk. They lined up to get the book. Hopefully, many of them read it and it inspired them and changed their lives and had a positive impact on their lives. So thank you, Jacob, for giving me the opportunity to speak to your students. He says, I still appreciate that and think you're the best. So thank you, Jacob. I really appreciate the support. Thank you for having invited me. Hopefully we can do it again sometime when I'm in California. That would be fun if you still teach at that school. All right, Shazbot writes, Dear God, we paid for all this stuff ourselves. So thanks for nothing. He's quoting Bart Simpson saying grace. I still prefer the Jimmy Stewart one. But then I prefer Jimmy Stewart to Bart Simpson pretty much any day. Brian Cheese writes, James Lindsay was asked about Ayn Rand. Now, the grammar of your sentence here is confusing, but I think what you're saying is He said that he thought she was overly optimistic about human nature, that it would require a pre-built society, liking it to how leftist system crumble, the failed attempt in South America. So basically he's saying she created a utopia built in a false view of human nature. And you know, I'm not surprised. James Lindsay is not a holder of a principled philosophy. I mean, he does good work on critical race theory and on some on postmodernism and their intellectual roots, but I don't think has a positive principled ideology. I think that even the better intellectuals today have a cynical view of mankind. They don't understand what Ayn Rand is saying by saying that man is a rational being, that he's capable of that and what's required in order for him to achieve that, and that you build a society for the best among men, and the people who don't achieve it. But the idea that society has to crumble, that people have to be irrational, that the irrational wins at the end of the day, I think that's an overly pessimistic view and not a true view of human nature, not an accurate view of human nature. But that is, he is a cynic when it comes to human beings, and it's sad that so many of our intellectuals today are cynics, and you know, it's yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult to, as a modern intellectual, it's difficult to grasp Ayn Rand's idea of man as a heroic being. And look, the reality is that, as I think Leonard Peikoff said once, we're not ready for objectivism. We're not ready for Ayn Rand's world. I mean, if we just shifted tomorrow to pure capitalism, people wouldn't know what to do with themselves. It's not true that freedom is in the heart of every human being. It's not true that people want to be free, that, you know, culture matters, and we're getting a rotten culture. And right now, could you establish an objectivist world you can't. People have to believe in those ideas. They have to understand them. They have to rationally choose them. And that is a very difficult task in the kind of context of the world in which we live.
Well, it's in the context of the doctrine of original sin, which is one of the foundations of Christian culture. People who believe themselves to be inherently sinful do not trust their own judgment and their own reason. And that is the crux of the matter. Get rid of the doctrine of original sin and its consequences, and we'll be halfway there.
So I think that's a big part of it, but it's more than Christianity, because it is rooted in Plato. You know, if you believe, as Platonic philosophers have, and they've been teaching this, and again, Christianity is a major root for these ideas. But if you believe that you can only know the truth through some form of revelation of the world of forms, and only certain people can achieve that, then yeah, then you're not going to be able to believe that human beings can be rational. You can't believe that you can be rational. There's a sense in which Christianity, the idea of original sin, is consistent with those ideas of Plato. But it's Plato's philosophy at the end of the day that is at the heart of all of these problems. And it's not easy to get rid of Plato's philosophy, and it's dominant. And if you go back to the German philosophers that are to a large extent responsible for the kind of the secular interpretation of Christianity in the modern world, they're all Platonists to one extent or another. They all suffer from the same problem, and they all divorce reason from reality. And therefore, if you divorce reason from reality, then yeah, I mean, people cannot achieve these wonderful things. And the fact that a few people do achieve, well, that's bound to collapse. It's bound to end. It's not sustainable. All right, let's go through these. We're getting more and more questions. This is good. Thank you, guys. Action Replay Person asks, do you think there is malevolent intent in governments around the world that they're too competent to actually achieve such ends? Or is it just a manifestation of Hanlon's razor, or a weird mixture of both? I think it's a weird mixture of both. There's no question some governments, not all governments, not as a conspiracy across governments, but there's certainly malevolent intent. Certainly some presidents would like to be authoritarian and they're too incompetent to achieve that. Certainly some would like to suppress free speech, or suppress the will of the people even more than it's suppressed today, but they're too incompetent to achieve it, or there's too much resistance to them achievement. But some of it is that they're just too incompetent, right? So a lot of what comes off as they want to take control is really, they're panicking. They have no idea what to do. They're dumbfounded, so they take control as a default. So it's a combination of response to out of incompetence and a certain malevolence, a certain, and it depends what you mean by malevolent, because there's a sense in which they're all malevolent. That is, they all want power, they all want control. But there's also, you could view malevolent as there's some, they want to take over the world, they want total power. And some of them do, and some of them don't. And the ones that do are too incompetent to achieve it so far. And the ones that don't act often as if they do because of their incompetence. All right, last question in this series, and then we'll go to the panel, and then we'll do one final round of super chats. Brian asks, I'm seeing a pattern with government shutdowns. 2018 shutdown over 5 billion border infrastructure. 2021 shutdown over 5 trillion human infrastructure. 2024 shutdown over 5 quintillion spiritual infrastructure. How likely? Well, I don't think they've gotten the 5 trillion human infrastructure from the shutdown. The shutdown is not happening. The Republicans caved. They approved a temporary spending bill, but it does not involve the 5 trillion human infrastructure. Although the 2024 5 quintillion spiritual infrastructure, I think, is very likely. I'm all with that. Right. So that is the there is what you're capturing is the ever growing nature of government, and it's growing so much that it's starting to be unimaginable how horrific it can get, but it's getting there. It's getting there. All right, I'm going to do one more round with the panelists. There's still time to make our $600 goal. We're 335, so it's 270. A few $50 questions like we had in this last round would get us there. So please, no $5 questions. I've got a bunch of those, $10 and $5 and $10 questions that I have to still answer. So I'm behind on those. But $20 questions, $30 questions, anything above $20 is welcome and would be great if we could let's at least get to the $400 goal, which is kind of our standard run-of-the-mill, day-to-day kind of stuff. And I think if we can get to the 400 goal, I will, this month will end the month at my monthly goal. All right. And as Ali says, we can do it. Ali's excited. All right. So go people, help Ali achieve her goals. Daniel.
There are a few different groups that I get emails from that I definitely don't agree with, but I follow them just to see what they say. One of them is Friends of the Earth. They say they strive for a more healthy and just world. And the way they do this is by defending the EPA and strengthening other agencies' work to protect public health from attacks by corporate polluters. So if one of these people come up to you during a Q&A and they, friends of ours say right now that Procter & Gamble is destroying the earth, and specifically that Head and Shoulder shampoo is helping drive orangutans and Sumatran rhinos to the brink of extinction. And they do this by slashing forests to grow palm oil for the use in shampoo and other products. Doesn't this prove that we need the regulatory state to prevent these companies from destroying the earth? And you know nothing about this particular issue. I mean, how do you respond to something like that?
Well, I mean, I respond by shifting to the positive. We live in in a time of incredible health, incredible longevity, incredibly clean air and clean water for people. Generally, an amazingly pleasant environment. We have time to enjoy nature, to stroll by the park, to go swimming in the lake. Life has never been better in a material sense for human beings on planet Earth. So even if you could make the argument that some orangutan somewhere is suffering, I don't care. And if you really do care about orangutans, as I like to say, buy some and preserve them. And the way to do that is to privatize land and to privatize animal stock. They've done that in a number of African countries with elephants and with rhinos to great success. The elephant herds and the rhino herds are growing where they've been privatized because there's suddenly an incentive to keep them from being poached and to keep them from going extinct. And my guess is you could do the same thing with orangutans and gorillas. So I would shift to the positive. And if they still emphasize, but the animals, then I would say privatize the animals. That's the solution.
Got it. Thank you.
And then keep them away from Head and Shoulder shampoo.
Yeah, they shouldn't be buying.
Use organic shampoo when you're shampooing your gorilla.
Exactly.
All right, Adam.
Thank you. There is one thing that I noticed about Korean popular TV series that is somehow, even though now and then there is a director with a very negative viewpoint. And again, I would ascribe that to the fraction of Koreans who are Christians. Those works are not popular. If you look at the list of the most popular film and TV in Korea, the ones that have a positive view of human choice, in other words, the romantic works, are always at the top.
Yep.
And this is something that I don't see elsewhere. So it's wonderful that Netflix gives us a choice from anywhere in the world. But other things being equal, I look at what is being watched by the most South Koreans. And that's a fairly good guide to what's really good out there.
Yeah, it really is interesting what's going on in South Korea. And I don't have a good explanation for it. And I don't, it doesn't manifest itself necessarily in other things. So South Korea, is elected a socialist and politically is not very good. And there's still a lot of conformity in South Korea, and it's still not as individualist a country as one would like to see. And maybe what these series are showing us is the yearning of the South Koreans for that individualism, which they haven't yet attained. But it is fascinating to watch this culture because there's something about Korean television that is so much better than anything else going on in the world today.
And there is one series that I watched recently, just finished, in fact. It's the deep-rooted tree, sometimes translated as the tree with deep roots.
Where did you watch it?
And it's not on Netflix, it's on Viki,
Oh, I've
which
got-
is a different distributor that I think is based in South Korea. But as a romantic story of a man finding purpose in life, and the woman he is in love with is part of the team that's creating an alphabet for Korean, for the Korean language. The Koreans had a phonetic alphabet
Okay.
and movable type printing about a century before Gutenberg in Europe. So, essentially, she is very much the driving force of the project.
I've noticed that in Korean dramas, the women are very strong, and the women drive really a lot of the action. So if you think about Mr. Sunshine, that's certainly true of Mr. Sunshine.
In any case, if
Tree with Deep Roots, I'll look for it.
yes.
Cool. I'm looking for a new Korean drama to watch. Great. All right. Thanks, Adam. It looks like Roy is going to have another recommendation for us. Go for it, Roy.
I do indeed, but before I get to it, Yaron, are you planning any trips to Berlin?
Maybe. But if I do, it'll be in March of next year.
Okay. Okay, so the other recommendation is a TV series called Patriot, which isn't to be confused with the film The Patriot. And it's being shown on Amazon Prime Video. And like Firefly and Serenity, which I know only thanks to Yaron, thanks to you.
Yep.
It successfully walks the line between adventure and comedy. However, Patriot's dramatic element is weightier than Firefly's was, because it deals with espionage and Iran's nuclear capability. So it's a very serious through line and the core. And its humor is darker and edgier than Firefly's. And at the end, it strikes a tones of very sweet benevolence, which is suddenly, oh, this is the guy behind it. His name is Stephen Conrad, I think. I'd never heard of him. I didn't know him. But so there's an undercurrent that informs everything of ultimate benevolence. So that's very nice. And the line it works, the line it works indeed, the line it walks between the serious and the comical is treacherously fine. And in fact, I didn't get it at first. So when I started watching, I watched the first episode and I said, I don't know. I'm not sure it knows what it wants to do. And I was going to stop at that point. And I'm really glad I didn't. And I continued. It has 2 seasons, total of only 18 episodes, because I think it's brilliant. And it's really brilliant.
Good.
It's called Patriot.
Well, thank you, Adam. Thank you, Roy, for the recommendations. We got a Turkish Black Money Love, Korean Tree with Deep Roots, and an American show called Patriot. The Turkish one is on Netflix. The Korean one is on Viki, and Patriot is on Prime. All right, we've got a few last Super Chat questions. You still have an opportunity to ask some Super Chat questions and get us to our goal for today. Next show will be on Saturday. And Saturday and Sunday, we'll do a couple of shows. So we're taking tomorrow off, and we'll do one on Saturday and Sunday to start off October. All right, probably do one of those will probably be a Rules for Life episode. All right, so Dave asks, was allowing the German prisoner of war to walk away and saving Private Ryan an altruistic action? If you were in charge of that scenario, would you have executed him? You know, it's tough. And of course, the movie makes the case that letting him walk away was the wrong thing to do, because of course he is the guy who shoots the hero of the movie at the end. So and he gets killed as well at the end. So he's going to get killed anyway. What I would have done was I would have tied him up, gagged him, and left him there to rot. And you know, hopefully an American troop would have found him and made him into a prisoner of war. But just starting to shoot prisoners whenever you can't do anything else with them, I think is probably wrong. If you know that this guy is going to go back to his troop, and you can't prevent that, him going back to joining the German army, then yes, then you need to shoot him, because then he's like he's got a gun in his hand. So it depends on what your options you face. If the only option is he's going to go back and he's going to be fighting you, and he now has information about you, then you've got to kill him. And characters like that you often see in the movies. You see it in I forget other movies that do this, but a lot of war movies and Westerns have this kind of thing where you go soft on the prisoners and he comes back to bite you. And you should have known better. You should have known better. Jeff, thank you. That is very, very generous. Really appreciate it. Jeff writes, thank you for integrating the concretes of current events into today's cultural trends. You help me make sense of the world. I really appreciate that. Thank you. Now, if only I could make sense of the world. No, I'm kidding. You know, the world is. But yes, I'm happy, glad that you guys see value in what I do. Dave, would you consider what the U.S. military did for Private Ryan altruistic? One could argue it's an act of justice after his mother had lost her other 3 sons. Yes, you know, it's a difficult decision to make, and I definitely think it's a decision that has to be made in the context of the particular war, in the context of the particular situation. I think given 3 brothers have died, you want to get the 4th out. How much are you willing to give up in order to do that is the question. Under what circumstances are you willing to do that is an important question. But it's not necessarily altruistic. It can be. I think in the case of Saving Private Ryan, in the context of that war, in that situation, it was borderline, because clearly you were putting a lot of people's lives at risk. And maybe waiting a week or 2 would have made it a lot easier to extract it. You're talking about the most important action of the war, the action that determined the fate of the war, where people were dying left and right, and suddenly you're diverting attention to something that's not essential for victory. I don't think it was the right thing to do at that point in time. I do think they could have waited. And yeah, he might have died, but I do think they could have and probably should have waited for a more opportune moment. Dave also said, I think Saving Private Ryan was the most realistic war film ever made. Way ahead of its time. It came out in 1998. Compared to quality of films in the late 1990s to today, it's just pathetic. Yes, but it's too realistic. I don't like realistic war movies. I don't like realism generally. I don't think realism, I like romanticism and I like stylization. You know, Ayn Rand admired the movies of Fritz Lang, the old silent German movies of Fritz Lang. where the scenery was painted by hand so that the director had complete control over every aspect of what happened. If they needed a tree, they painted a tree, and they painted exactly the kind of tree that the director wanted. So I'm not saying that's what we should be doing, but I do believe that movie making should be stylized, not realistic. And I think there's too much realism in Saving Private Ryan. So from a stylistic perspective, I didn't, as I said yesterday or the day before, whenever I talked about it, I didn't like it. But yes, movies have not gotten better in the last 20 years. They've gotten worse and they've gotten more realistic in many respects. Brian asked, would you consider how woke companies operate in a philosopher king type manner, a form of cronyism? How they forgo merit, I guess, is any system not based on merit a form of cronyism? No, cronyism is specifically related to the government relationship, the business's relationship to the government. Cronyism is about seeking favor from government. I would say all these ignoring merit is just plain incompetence, and not just incompetence. It's a violation of the fiduciary duty of the business. So cronyism, I would limit to the relationship between business and government, not the incompetence or the bad philosophy that businesses apply to their own employees. And some businesses do that. My view is that in the long run, they won't survive the competition. It's too much of a competitive advantage for being in this world, for using reality and merit as your standards. Corey asks, everyone wants to be free until they find out what the correct definition of freedom actually is. Yes, everybody wants freedom. They have no clue what it means. But when they realize what the correct definition of freedom is, what it requires, unfortunately, it's a great achievement to want freedom in the proper sense, a great achievement. Very few periods in human history have attained it. Frank mentions a Fritz Lang movie that is unknown. It's one of his American movies, one of his first American movies with Spencer Tracy called Fury. That is an amazingly powerful movie. It's a talkie, it's not a silent movie, but it's one of his American movies. And I actually liked a lot of Fritz Lang's American movies. He made Westerns. I liked his Westerns. I liked his film noir, like gritty detective stories. They were very good. I generally am a big fan of Fritz Lang, including his American movies. But Fury is, I think, underappreciated movie. It really is a truly fantastic movie. All right, I think this is the last question, unless somebody jumps in and gets us with more questions. Frank says, regarding people say, why must I work? I just want to do my hobbies. Do you think the novel or music or painting from this type of person would be any good? No, I mean, no. That whole mentality is a mentality of lack of achievement, a mentality of entitlement, a mentality of mediocrity, a mentality of mediocrity. So no, I don't think anything they produced would be of much value. All right, sorry, Ali. They didn't do it for you today. They almost always do. They almost always come through for you in the end. And I guess there's still a couple of minutes as I wrap up here. Somebody could put down $200 to make Ali's day with a $600 goal. We did reach 400, but not quite the 600 that we were shooting for. But I appreciate all of the Super Chat, everybody who was on. Thank you for our panel, Daniel, Adam, Roy, and congratulations to Debbie. Thank you for the questions. Thank you for the support of the Yaron Brook Show. I encourage everybody, all of you listening, particularly those who don't listen live, therefore don't participate in the Super Chat. I know that almost every one of these episodes are downloaded onto podcast apps, over about 2,000 times. And then anywhere between 1,500 and 3,000, 4,000 people watch this on YouTube after the live show. If you guys out there are gaining value from the show, only a percentage of you actually support the show financially. I'd appreciate you considering supporting the show. You can do so at yaronbrookshow.com/support. And some of you I know have the ability to support the show with significant dollars. Some of you don't. At whatever level you can, at whatever level you want, at whatever level you think it's a fair trade, it's a value for value trade, it's a win-win trade, please considering supporting the show. It's yaronbrookshow.com/support. You can also do it on Patreon, on Subscribestar, and on Locals. So thanks, everybody. And don't forget to like the show before you leave. Don't forget to subscribe if you're not a subscriber. And I will see you all on Saturday. Goodbye, September. Let's have a great October. Thanks, everybody. Bye. Have a great night.